Most women think they know the 3 places every man wants to be touched, but the truth is they're almost always wrong, because the spots that actually drive him wild aren't just about desire, they're about making him feel something deeper, seen, safe, and completely captivated by you. When we talk about touch, most people immediately think about the obvious physical gestures or the intimate parts of a relationship. But what many overlook is that for a man, the most powerful places you can touch are not always about skin-to-skin contact. They're about the emotional meaning behind that touch, because while a man may appear tough, logical, or even detached on the surface, underneath he craves reassurance, acceptance, and genuine desire just as much as anyone else. And the irony is that society rarely gives him permission to admit it. So when you reach out in a way that is intentional, thoughtful, and full of care, it can leave a deeper impression than any passionate embrace ever could, because what he longs for isn't simply the physical sensation, but the feeling that comes with it, the unspoken message that says, I see you, I want you, I value you. And this is where so many women underestimate their own power, thinking touch is something men give more than they receive, when in reality, men are often starved for that kind of affirmation. So imagine the difference it makes when your hand brushes his arm, not just as a casual move, but as a reminder that you are present with him, proud of him, or when your fingers linger a moment longer, letting him know you're not just being polite, but that you truly enjoy the connection, because those little signals tell him that he doesn't have to constantly perform to win your approval, that with you he can relax, breathe, and simply exist. And this is why it's not just about physicality, because even the most intimate acts will fall flat if they are stripped of intention. But a simple, well-timed touch backed by emotion can leave him thinking about it all day, replaying the warmth of that moment in his mind, reminding him of the bond you share. And when you understand this, you start to see that touch is one of the rare languages men don't often get to speak fluently in their daily lives, but one they desperately understand and appreciate when it's offered with sincerity, because while compliments and words can fade into the background, the memory of a meaningful touch stays in his body, or in his nervous system, in the way his heart rate slows or speeds up in response, and it anchors him to the feeling of being cared for. So when I say it's not just physical, what I mean is that every act of touch carries with it an energy that either says I'm with you or I'm distracted, and the ones that truly impact him are the ones that reassure him on a deeper level beyond the surface, because at the end of the day, yes, passion is exciting, but without that layer of emotional presence, it's fleeting, whereas a single, simple gesture of intentional touch becomes unforgettable, precisely because it reaches beyond his skin and into his sense of self. When you touch a man on his arm or shoulder, it may seem like the simplest gesture, almost insignificant compared to more obviously intimate forms of contact, but in reality, it carries a kind of power that most people overlook, because the arm and shoulder are places that hold both physical strength and symbolic meaning. They are associated with action, protection, and confidence, and when you place your hand there, you are not only acknowledging his presence, but also showing him subtle admiration and connection in a way that feels natural rather than forced. And this matters deeply, because men, whether they admit it or not, want to feel that their strength, their role, and their efforts are noticed. And a gentle touch on his arm while you're laughing at his joke or leaning closer in a conversation tells him that you're engaged, that his energy has reached you, and that you are open to him, which is often more affirming than any words you could say. And what makes this gesture so special is how versatile it is, because in a public setting, where bigger displays of affection might feel awkward or inappropriate, that light brush of your fingers across his forearm or that squeeze on his shoulder can send a private message that says, I'm with you, I choose you, I'm proud to stand by you, all without drawing anyone else's attention. And men treasure this because it makes them feel desired not just behind closed doors, but in the world, where your touch acts as a reminder that they matter to you in every context context. And there is also something deeply grounding about it, because when stress, work, or life weighs on him, the simple press of your palm against his shoulder communicates support, almost like telling him he doesn't have to carry everything alone, and that even if he is the strong one, someone is strong for him too. And this feeds into a primal desire men rarely articulate, to be both protector and protected, to give strength but also to be seen as worthy of care. And your touch in that spot gives him that balance without a single word, because it validates both sides of his nature. And beyond reassurance, the playful side of an arm or shoulder touch shouldn't be underestimated either, because those small nudges, taps, or lingering strokes inject lightness and flirtation into the interaction, making him feel like he's not just admired but also enjoyed, that he's fun to be around, that you're comfortable expressing yourself physically without needing it to escalate immediately into something sexual, which ironically makes the moment even more magnetic. And the best part is that this kind of touch is accessible, easy, and doesn't need a perfect moment, because you can do it while walking side by side, while leaning in during a story, or even while passing by him at home. And every time you do, you layer another brick into the foundation of intimacy, the kind of intimacy that men remember not as grand gestures, but as a consistent flow of energy that tells them they are wanted, safe, and recognized. And if you pay attention, you'll notice how quickly his body reacts to these subtle touches, how he straightens a little taller, how his eyes soften, how his guard lowers, because these signals bypass his rational mind and go straight to his nervous system, letting him feel valued on an instinctive level. And that's why such a simple act as touching his arm or shoulder can be far more profound than it appears, because while the world may admire his strength, your touch makes him feel something deeper, that you admire the man behind the strength. When you touch a man on his face or neck, you enter a space that is far more intimate than most people realize, because these are areas that naturally carry vulnerability, sensitivity, and a sense of trust. And while a casual touch on the arm might communicate connection or admiration, when your hand rests against his cheek or slides gently along the side of his neck, you're not just engaging with his body, you're speaking directly to his emotions, because the face and neck are zones where strength fades into softness, where his guard has to drop in order to let you in. And that is exactly why it has such an impact, because for so many men, the world rarely invites them to be tender, to let their toughness melt away, but your touch in those places gives silent permission for him to do so. And that permission is unforgettable, because think about how it feels when someone cups your face during a kiss, or traces their fingers down your neck slowly. It creates a surge of intensity, not just because of the physical sensation, but because of the feeling of being completely seen. And men crave that more than they will ever admit, because as much as society trains them to be stoic and composed, they long for those rare moments when someone cherishes them, not for what they do, but for who they are. And your touch in that intimate space delivers exactly that. It says, I want to hold you close. I want to feel your presence without distraction. I want you as you are. And this is why so many of the most romantic or passionate moments revolve around the face and neck, because those touches elevate a simple kiss, a simple embrace, into an emotional experience, one that lingers long after the moment ends. And beyond romance, there's also comfort in it, because when you run your hand along his jawline when he's stressed, or place your fingers lightly on the back of his neck when he's tired, you're offering more than affection, you're offering peace, grounding him in a way that says you can rest here, you don't have to hold the weight right now. And men, often starved of this kind of nurturing, find it magnetic, because it gives them something they rarely get elsewhere, a sanctuary in your touch. And even outside of those soft moments, there's a primal attraction tied to the neck as well, because it's one of the most sensitive areas of the body, filled with nerve endings that make even the lightest touch electric, and that spark creates anticipation, arousal, and a sense of intimacy that no amount of words can replicate. But what truly makes it powerful is that it's never just about passion. It's about the trust it takes for him to allow you there, because because a man can laugh with anyone, he can share space with many, but he will only let someone he deeply trusts place their hand on his face or neck without flinching, without feeling the need to hold control. And when you understand this, you realize that such a simple gesture is actually a doorway to his heart, because it bridges the gap between his need for affection and his fear of exposing weakness. And the more often you give him that kind of intentional, tender contact, the more you teach him that vulnerability is safe with you, that intimacy isn't a transaction but a gift, and that in your presence he can let down the mask he wears for the world, which is why the memory of your touch on his face or neck stays with him long after, not just as a physical memory, but as an emotional imprint that reminds him of what it feels like to be truly loved, truly wanted, and truly seen. When you touch a man on his back or chest, you are reaching into a space that symbolizes strength, pride, and grounding, and yet it's also one of the places where he secretly longs for reassurance, because his back is the part of him that faces the world, the side he carries responsibilities with, the side that often bears the invisible weight of stress and pressure. So when your hand rests there, whether it's a firm, supportive touch between his shoulder blades or a soft caress down his spine, it communicates something deeply comforting, almost like saying, "I'm here, you don't have to carry everything alone." And that message is far more powerful than it might seem, because even though men are conditioned to project confidence and control, what they often crave most is the quiet acknowledgement that someone has their back, literally and emotionally, and your touch becomes that anchor, the thing that steadies him when the noise of life feels overwhelming. While on the chest, the meaning shifts slightly but with equally profound impact, because the chest is not just about physical attraction or masculine pride, it's the place where his heartbeat lives, where his vulnerabilities sit hidden under layers of muscle, posture, and bravado. And when you place your hand there, you remind him that you feel him, not just the body he shows the world, but the humanity underneath. And men respond to that with an almost childlike openness, because it's rare for them to be met with gestures that bypass the surface and go straight to their core. And whether you're standing beside him in a crowd, pressing your palm lightly against his chest to keep him close, or lying together with your head on that same spot, you're creating an intimacy that is both protective and romantic, because the chest is where men want to feel chosen, respected, and safe. And your willingness to touch him there with intention tells him he is more than his achievements, more than his role. He is simply someone worthy of being held. And if you pay attention, you'll notice how he breathes differently when you do it, how his body relaxes, how his energy softens, because touch in those areas doesn't just stimulate, it grounds. It tells him without words that in your presence he is allowed to set down the armor. And this is something most men rarely get in their day-to-day lives, where they are expected to be the rock for everyone else. And your hand on his back as he moves forward, or on his chest as he leans into you, becomes a language of love that he cannot ignore, because it ties into both his desire to be strong and his need to be supported, fulfilling both without contradiction. And over time, these simple touches become the moments he remembers most, not the grand displays or passionate encounters, but the times when you silently reminded him that he is not alone in the fight, that he is admired for who he is, and that he has a safe place to land in you. And that combination of pride, strength, and vulnerability makes your touch on his back and chest one of the most powerful ways to connect with him on a level that lasts far beyond the physical. Playfulness in touch is often overlooked, yet it is one of the most magnetic forces in a relationship, because while passion and intensity have their moments, it's the light-hearted, teasing, and spontaneous gestures that breathe joy and freshness into a connection. And for men, this kind of touch carries a unique power, because it reminds them that love doesn't always have to be heavy or serious. It can be fun, energizing, and full of laughter. And when you reach out to playfully nudge his side while walking, tap his hand as you tease him, or ruffle his hair with a mischievous grin, you're doing far more than just touching him. You're signaling that you enjoy his company, that you feel free around him, and that he brings out a side of you that is unguarded and youthful. And men are incredibly drawn to this energy because it makes them feel like they're not just partners, but also companions in play, which taps into a primal desire for lightness that often gets buried under the weight of responsibility. And the beauty of playful touch is that it builds anticipation and attraction without pressure, because when you brush past him intentionally but with a smile, or give him a cheeky shove before pulling him back close, you're mixing flirtation with fun, creating a dynamic where he's never entirely sure what to expect but always eager for more. And that unpredictability keeps the relationship exciting, because instead of falling into routine or monotony, you inject sparks that remind him how alive he feels around you. And even in intimate settings, playfulness can transform the energy from something predictable into something unforgettable. Because when you laugh together mid-kiss or tease him with a gentle pull away before leaning back in, you're blending passion with humor, and that duality creates a memory far stronger than either alone. And what's most powerful about playful touch is the way it lowers his guard, because men are often conditioned to maintain control, to appear composed. But when you tickle his side, tug his sleeve, or tap his nose with your finger, you're breaking through that shield in the most disarming way, making him drop his seriousness and meet you in a space of authenticity. And it's in those moments of shared laughter and silliness that bonds deepen, because he feels not just desired but also fully accepted, like he can be both manly and boyish with you without fear of judgment. And that's intoxicating for him, because while passion excites, playfulness sustains, giving him the sense that being with you will never grow dull, that you are a source of joy as much as intimacy. And even small gestures like brushing lint off his shirt with exaggerated care, or stealing his hat and refusing to give it back, spark feelings of closeness that words could never capture, because they build inside jokes, shared moments, and a rhythm of interaction that is uniquely yours. And over time, these little acts of playful touch become the glue that holds everything together, because they remind him that while love can be serious, it doesn't have to be solemn, and that with you, he not only finds comfort and desire, but also the priceless feeling of fun, which is something men rarely get in the outside world. And that is why he cherishes it so deeply when he finds it in you. Intention is the invisible force that transforms any touch from something ordinary into something unforgettable, because while the body can register sensation, it's the energy behind it that creates meaning. And men are especially attuned to this, even if they don't consciously realize it, because they live in a world where so much of their interaction is transactional, where people shake their hands out of formality or pat them on the back out of habit. But when you touch him with genuine feeling, with focus and presence, he senses the difference immediately, because intention communicates without words. It tells him whether your touch is rushed or thoughtful, whether it comes from obligation or desire. And men, though they may not articulate it, crave the kind of contact that makes them feel chosen rather than tolerated, wanted rather than taken for granted. So when you place your hand on his arm, face, or chest, the difference between a fleeting brush and a lingering hold lies not in the mechanics but in the message. And if the message behind your touch is, "I'm here with you, I want you, I care for you," then it strikes him on a level far deeper than physical arousal. It anchors him to the moment. It reassures him that your presence is intentional, not accidental. And this is why two identical touches can create opposite reactions, one forgotten within seconds and the other remembered for days, because intention adds depth. It turns a simple caress into a memory that replays in his mind. It makes him feel secure enough to let down his guard. And in a world world where men are constantly asked to perform, prove, and provide, the gift of a touch filled with pure intention is priceless, because it tells him that with you, he doesn't need to be anything but himself. And when you give that to him consistently, you create a bond that becomes hard to replace, because it's not just about where you touch but why, not just about the physical spark, but about the emotional truth that spark carries. And this is why he remembers how you made him feel long after he forgets the details, because the body forgets surface sensation but never forgets meaning, and the meaning is created entirely by intention. So every time you reach out, whether you're brushing his hair back from his forehead, holding his hand a little tighter in a crowd, or pressing your palm against his back when he's tired, ask yourself what you're silently communicating, because if it's love, care, admiration, or desire, he will feel it, even if he can't explain it, and those intentional touches accumulate over time, building trust, building connection, until he begins to associate your presence with safety, passion, and belonging, which is why intention is the thread that ties every place together, because without it, touch becomes empty, but with it, touch becomes the most powerful language of intimacy you could ever speak. So in the end, it's not really about learning a list of secret spots on his body, it's about understanding the deeper truth that every man wants to feel desired, supported, safe, and seen, and your touch has the power to give him that in ways words never could. Whether it's the casual brush of his arm, the vulnerable connection of his face and neck, the grounding presence on his back or chest, the playful spark that keeps him smiling, or the pure intention that turns any touch into something unforgettable. Each of these moments sends him a message he'll carry long after the moment has passed. Because while passion might ignite desire, it's the way you consistently use touch to say, "I see you, I choose you, I'm here with you," that makes a man feel anchored, cherished, and unable to forget the woman who gave him that rare gift.